Well, for more on the digital afterlife, I spoke to Christopher Moreman. He's author of the book Digital Death and an associate philosophy professor at California State University, East Bay. I began by asking what happens to our digital assets when we die.
We're kind of in a nebulous zone at this point still in terms of ownership of digital property. A lot of the companies that you might deal with online, like Facebook or Google, have user agreements where it's not clear that you are actually the sole owner of the information that you put out there. You have access to their website and you can use it to post information, but after your death, the ground becomes murky as to whether or not you still own that information. We know for sure that you can't you can't will that information to a loved one in the same way that you could will real hard property that you own. The information on Facebook still remains kind of in a relationship between Facebook and you as a deceased person. And Facebook, in their user agreement, expects that no one else will be using that information.
Why do you think we're not seeing more tech companies take more ownership of this, being that there are so many millions of people with social media accounts?
Mm-hmm. If you take the example of Facebook, they've integrated something called a legacy contact feature. And on your Facebook profile, you can go into your preferences and assign somebody as a legacy contact. And after your death, Facebook will contact that legacy contact, and that person then will have the option to memorialize your account or to completely delete your account. It doesn't give them access to all of the information that's in your account or the ability to use your account. But if they memorialize it, then it at least allows all of that information that you posted to remain online, and Facebook will keep maintaining the profile indefinitely, which allows other people to still access your Facebook page the same way they can do now. And people will often post messages to deceased loved ones still, messages of condolence or comments, indicating how much they miss them or celebrating their birthdays and that kind of thing.
And it can be difficult. Obviously, you're already dealing with losing someone and then having to also deal with the information that they have stored. And that also raises a lot of issues when it comes to privacy. There was a woman who basically had shared her iTunes account and her Apple account with her husband and had to file a lawsuit against Apple to be able to get his password. So what are some of the other apps and developments that people are trying to work on to help smooth this transition?
Right. Well, there's a great website called the Digital Beyond that they have been trying to put together just lists of different websites and apps that are dealing with all of these issues of our digital legacy in different ways. One service in particular that I think is interesting is called LastPass, and it really, I think it's useful while you're still alive as well, but it essentially maintains all of your passwords as you have to change your passwords constantly. You might have different passwords at different websites and apps and devices. And this service can maintain all of your passwords, and within the app you can designate somebody else to have access to those passwords as well, for them to be able to access important information, like if you had pictures in email accounts that you wanted them to be able to access, or banking information online that it might be inaccessible, and a whole array of online devices now that we're using that are going to end up being blocked from other people's access if you don't pass on your password to them. If without an app like that, you would just need to physically give somebody all of your passwords and make sure that they had a up-to-date list so they'd be able to access all of those things.
Now, obviously, being that death is something that is difficult to face, and you mentioned preparedness. Now, what are some of the potential legal pitfalls when it comes to accessing this information? People could have manuscripts that they're halfway through writing on the cloud. So what are some of the pitfalls that could be up ahead for people who are trying to get access to these things but don't really know what to do?
Well, as you mentioned, with privacy issues, if somebody else asks for the password to access a spouse's account, the company's position is this is a privacy issue, and the spouse didn't tell them that you had access to their account, and the user agreement says you're not supposed to have access to the account, so they're not going to give you access to the account.
We have a lot of people who still don't have traditional wills, let alone now adding this extra level of worrying about your digital presence. What's your view on that?
Well, I think preparedness is key. So, I mean, from my perspective, I think people ought to be thinking about wills, but that also means people ought to be thinking about their digital legacy. Beyond that, we would probably also want to reflect on what we're actually posting online. If we know that, for instance, take Facebook again as an example, the Facebook profile might become memorialized after our death and remain online indefinitely into the future. That basically makes everything we're posting on our Facebook page something that could remain part of our legacy indefinitely.